The applicant knocked over the water glass in the first 10 seconds, apologized, laughed it off. They answered everything right for the next 40 minutes. In the debrief, only one word survived. Clumsy. You know this from the other side. You met someone at a party, decided something about them in the first minute, and spent the rest of the night quietly collecting proof. Everything they did after that fit. The good joke confirmed it. The awkward pause confirmed it too. Somehow both. That's the strange part. It wasn't that you stopped getting new information. You kept getting it. You just stopped letting it change the verdict. The first read didn't fade as you learned more. It said, tonight, on this table, we find out why it sets like that, and why it almost never comes back off. Here's the question nobody asks about a first impression. Not why it forms. Everything forms one. Why won't it come off later, no matter how much better evidence you bring? Start with the speed. You didn't decide over the evening. The read was finished before they'd crossed the room. A few seconds. A face, a posture, the first 4 words. From almost nothing, the mind files a whole person. And it doesn't do this because it's lazy. It does it because it has to. A mind that waits for enough data to be fair never decides anything in time to matter. So the first read was never built to be accurate. It was built to be fast and usable and done. Accuracy was never the job. That's the first thing to hold. The label on you was written to be acted on, not to be true. Speed bought certainty, and certainty was the whole point. Now watch what the label does the moment it exists, because this is where it stops being a guess and becomes something much harder to move. Before the label, you were asking a question. Who is this? After the label, you're asking a different one. Does this fit? It's a small switch and it changes everything. A question that's still open weighs the evidence. A question that's already answered just sorts it. So new information stops arriving as evidence. It arrives as a card to be filed. Fits the folder or doesn't. And the two piles are not treated the same. Watch first what happens to the card that fits. It goes straight in. No inspection. Of course they did that, it's who they are. Confirmation never gets searched at the door. Now the other card. The thing they did that the label can't explain. It gets stopped, questioned, and quietly given a reason. A bad day. A fluke. Not really them. The contradiction never touches the file. It gets a footnote and goes to the back under exception. First finding. A first impression isn't a verdict waiting to be updated. It's a filter deciding which evidence is even allowed to count. And it wrote itself before the evidence arrived. This is where it gets unfair in a way you felt but maybe never named. The exact same act lands in 2 opposite places, decided only by which label was written first. Say the first read was good. Warm, capable, one of us. Then you make a real mistake in week 3. The mistake doesn't land on you. It lands on the day. Not like them, something must be going on. The good label reaches out and catches the fall. Now flip it. First read was cool. Off somehow, hard to place. Then you do something genuinely good in week 3. The good thing doesn't land either. It's held at arm's length. Making an impression, wonder what they want. The low label reaches out and catches that too. Same act. Opposite fate. Not because the act differed, it was identical. Because the folder it fell into was labeled before it ever happened. You've been on the wrong side of this. You did the work, it was good, and it still somehow counted against you. You weren't imagining it. You were filed before you started. And you've done it to someone too. Decided early that a person was difficult, and then watched every neutral thing they did turn faintly difficult in your hands. That's the quiet cruelty of the mechanism. It doesn't just resist correction. It turns the correction into more of itself. The high label makes more evidence of height. The low label makes more evidence of lowness. The file feeds itself and it eats whatever you bring. So the person with the good first read gets a lifetime of the benefit of the doubt. The person with the bad one spends years paying a bill from a night they can barely remember. Second finding, and it's the whole video. You are not being judged on what you do. You're being judged on whether what you do confirms the sentence someone wrote about you in the first 4 seconds. So you try to fix it. Of course you do. You feel the bad file on you and you push against it. Watch what the push does. You come back sharper, warmer, more prepared. You overcorrect in exactly the direction the label is wrong about. And the room reads the effort itself as a tell. Because a bad label predicts something. And the correction, however good, gets read as proof of the very thing you're burying. Something to prove. Knew it. This is the trap that closes on people. The more visibly you fight the impression, the more material you hand it. Protest reads as pattern. And the calmer version fails a different way. Do nothing, and the file just sits there, confirmed by default, every ordinary day another line under the old total. So you're caught. Push and you feed it. Wait and you confirm it. That isn't bad luck. That's the shape of the thing. Remember what the file actually is. Not a belief someone is defending. A question they already closed. You're not arguing against an opinion. You're trying to reopen a case the room has stamped shut. And nobody reopens a closed case for more of the same evidence. They only reopen it for something that doesn't fit the folder at all. Something the label has no slot for. That's the narrow door. not a better performance of who they already decided you are. A moment so far outside the file that the old label has nowhere to put it. A wholly new context. A role they never once cast you in. The shock of the mismatch is the only thing strong enough to make a room start a second file. But be honest about the odds. Most of the time you never get that context. You get the same room, the same table, the same people who already know exactly who you are. Which is why the impression is almost impossible to undo. Not because people are cruel. Because the second look was never a look at all. It was a filing. Third finding. You almost never get a second first impression, because you almost never get a second first context. The room reads you once. After that, it only rereads the file. So now turn the lamp around. Off the people who filed you and onto the files you're keeping on everyone else. Say the ethics plainly because this cuts both ways. This is a map for catching yourself filing people. It is not a trick for stamping yourself onto them faster. You have folders open on people you decided about years ago. A relative, coworker, someone you figured out on the first day and never once re-met. Everything they've done since you filed. The kind thing was them being strategic. The cold thing was just them being themselves. The folder decided which. And you'd swear you know them. You don't. You know one sentence you wrote before you had any evidence, and a drawer of clippings you chose to keep it company. Here's the test. Think of the person you're most sure about. Now try to recall one thing they did that broke your read. If you can't find one, that's not because it never happened. It's because you filed it under exception and stopped looking. The contradictions are all in there. You just kept them where they could never reach the verdict. This is why old friends can't see you change. Why your family still talks to the 12-year-old version of you. The person updated. The file didn't. And it's why the room that met you on a bad day is holding a version of you that no longer exists, reading everything you do now through a face you wore once, for an hour. You can't reason them out of it. You already know that from trying. The file doesn't answer arguments. It just files them. The only thing that ever moves a file is a context it has no slot for. Most days you won't get one. So the honest move isn't to fight every file. It's to know which ones you're carrying, and how little you closed them on. Last cut. What do you do with this? Not this. Don't go engineer a flawless first 4 seconds and think you've solved it. You'll only be filed faster, and just as blind. And not the other thing either. Don't spend your years arguing an old file open. You'll only hand it fresh pages and call that progress. Spend it inward instead, on the folders you didn't even know you were keeping. Pick one person you're certain about. Open the folder. Read the top card, the first sentence you ever wrote about them, and notice you can't remember the day you wrote it. Then read the thick stack underneath, and see how much of it you gathered only to prove that first line right. That's the whole autopsy. The impression isn't hard to undo because it's strong. It's hard to undo because it stopped being a judgment and became the thing that does the judging. Somewhere out there is a room holding a version of you that isn't you anymore, reading your every move through one old afternoon. And somewhere in your own drawers is a person who changed years ago, still filed under the sentence you wrote the day you met them. You were going to look them up tonight to prove your read was right. Look instead for the one card you filed under exception. It's in there. You put it there yourself. Same table next week.